Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're deconstructing the UK government's 2025 budget document. This is basically the master plan for the country's finances and public services, so let's get right into it. With the cost of living biting and the economy feeling a bit sluggish, everyone's asking the same thing. What's the government's plan? Well, the budget document kicks off by tackling that head-on, admitting that, times are tough. So what's their answer? Let's take a look.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The whole thing, the entire budget, really boils down to three core promises. You see them right at the top of the executive summary. It's all about cutting living costs, tackling those NHS waiting lists, and, you guessed it, getting a handle on the national debt. So, how are they going to do all that? Well, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at what they're doing for the cost of living. Then, we'll get into the tax system, public services, and wrap up with the big, long-term economic plan.
All right, first up, easing the cost of living. Let's dig into the stuff that's designed to help your wallet, because let's be honest, this is the part that hits home for most of us, right?
So, one of the big headliners is a cut to energy bills. The budget is aiming to shave an average of £150 off household bills starting next April. And how are they doing that? Well, it looks like they're changing up how they fund renewable energy, basically moving that cost off of our bills.
And if you're a commuter, this one's for you. For the first time in 30 years, 30 years, they're freezing regulated train fares for a whole year. The document says this could save some folks over 300 quid a year, which is definitely not nothing.
Okay, what about drivers? Well, that 5p fuel duty cut that was supposed to be temporary, it's sticking around a bit longer. They're extending it all the way to August 2026. After that, though, it looks like it'll start creeping back up.
And it's not just about transport and energy. The budget also freezes prescription charges in England for another year. Plus, it confirms a couple of other important things. The national living wage is set to hit £12.71 an hour in 2026, and the state pension is staying protected by that triple lock. That means it'll go up by 4.8% next year.
Okay, so that covers the immediate cost of living stuff. Now let's shift gears and talk about the second big theme, making the tax system fairer. The budget lays out some pretty big reforms here, all under the banner of fairness and modernization. And this quote from the document really says it all, doesn't it? The core idea is this: they're signaling a major shift. The plan is to get more tax from wealth and assets instead of relying so much on taxing the money people earn from their jobs. And here's a perfect example of that principle in action. They're bringing in a new council tax surcharge in England specifically for the most expensive homes. We're talking about the top 1% of properties. The idea is that those with the most valuable houses should chip in a bit more for local services. It's not just about new taxes, though. They're also tweaking some of the existing tax breaks. Take this one, for employee ownership trusts. The document basically says the cost of this scheme has ballooned to 20 times what they expected, so they're cutting the relief in half, from 100% down to 50%. Okay, and this is a really interesting one, looking ahead. As we all know, more and more people are switching to electric cars. That's great for the environment, but it means the government gets way less money from fuel duty. So, to plug that gap, they're introducing a new per-mile tax just for electric cars, kicking in from 2028. All right, let's move on to our third section, fixing public services. Here, we're going to look at some major changes to welfare and what the plans are for the NHS. Now, this is a huge one. Probably the single biggest welfare reform in the whole document is scrapping the two-child limit in universal credit. The budget claims this is the most effective way to tackle child poverty and projects that this one change alone could lift 450,000 kids out of poverty. That's a massive number. And what's really crucial here is how they frame it. This isn't just presented as a social policy to help families. The document argues it's actually a long-term economic strategy. The thinking is that tackling poverty now boosts the economy's health in the long run.
So alongside that big welfare change, there are other key plans for public services. They're talking about 250 new neighbourhood health centres to make it easier to see someone. There's also £300 million going into NHS tech to boost productivity. And to help pay for all this, they're aiming for almost £5 billion in savings across government departments, partly by cutting what the document calls the cost of politics, like abolishing police and crime commissioners. Okay, for our final section, let's zoom all the way out and look at the long-term economic plan. Because if you read through this budget, one theme comes up again and again and again: the UK's massive, long-standing productivity problem.
So what is productivity growth? It's basically a measure of how efficiently we produce stuff. And the document is really clear on this. It says weak productivity is the root cause of why the UK economy has been so sluggish for the last decade. The argument is that fixing this is the only real way to get long-term growth and actually raise living standards.
But here's the rub. Here's the real challenge. The OBR, that's the independent watchdog for the UK economy, has actually downgraded its forecast for productivity. They think it's going to be lower than they did before. And that one little change has a huge knock-on effect. It wipes a staggering £16 billion a year off the government's expected tax income, a huge hole to fill.
So how does the government plan to beat that pretty gloomy forecast? Well, their strategy rests on these three pillars. It's all about investing in infrastructure, backing businesses with things like tax incentives, and then unleashing talent through skills training and visa reforms.
And that really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? The budget's whole message is about creating a secure future. It lays out a ton of policies to try and get there, but at the end of the day, the success of this entire plan really hinges on one thing. Can these policies actually overcome that deep-rooted productivity problem and prove the official forecasters wrong? That's the billion-pound question.